Hi, again. So you've had Kabiru talking about how women are portrayed in media, and we could do better, to be honest. We really could do better. And the last panel is going to tell us about that, because they're talking about developing the next generation of female leaders. And here they go.
Okay.
Hi, Tess. Hi, Sarah. Hi, Chris. Your panel is just about to start off. What you guys are going to tell us is whether we think sponsorship and mentorship actually do work. Can Sarah switch on her video, please?
I'm trying to switch on, sorry for the technical issue.
Okay. You sure it's not the tape that you put on your camera?
I have not taped the camera. So it's, I have no idea why. But let me just be investigating the issue as we go ahead.
Hi, Lenin. Switch on your camera as well. Show us your faces. We want to see you so that we can believe what you're telling us. Meanwhile, please go to Twitter and find hashtag Hanovation. Take a look at the thread and tell us what you think. We're really interested in hearing your thoughts about women in technology leadership, because as we've discussed today, you've seen that there are obstacles that get in the way. For instance, the broken rung, which is the first step of managerial promotion that women don't get because it goes to men, or the women are not being self-promoted, or they're not taking a look at their leadership skills and they're not going to school to learn more about it. So there are a lot of things that you can do as a woman if you want to upgrade yourself and to get that promotion. Did you guys watch the previous sessions? Can you turn on your mics? Sarah and Lenin, where did you go?
I listened to a couple.
All right.
And out.
Oh, Chris, your lighting is good. Your lighting works.
I told you the challenge of dark skins. We normally have to put on all the lights in the house.
Yeah. So the moderator, you can take over. Tess, it's good to have you here. You look lovely.
Thank you.
Yeah, you can run your show.
All right. Thank you so much, Carol, for the introduction. I'm glad to be here, and we have our panelists with us. Our session is going to take about 30 minutes, and our topic of discussion is generating the next. Our topic of discussion will be developing the next generation of women leaders. I know we have had several sessions talking about women and generally how we can, champion for the women within the workplace. And today we are joined with 4 panelists. We have Agnes. Not sure that I can see her in the panel list, but we have Agnes, we have Lenin, we have Chris, and we have Sarah. So I'll go ahead and do a brief introduction of our speakers for today. So Agnes Gataya, I'll start with Agnes Gataya in that order. She has 24 years of commercial leadership, and specifically in strategy, sales, and business development. She has held several numerous leadership positions, for example, Deloitte Consulting, SAP, Safaricom, and she was recently the CEO of IPSL. Agnes also sits on several boards, for example, the United Way, Africa Women in FinTech, and Payments Association of Kenya. Currently, Agnes is the Country Director for East Africa at Google. Welcome, Agnes. Our next speaker for this panel is Lenin Oyuga. Lenin describes himself as a very performance-focused leader. Throughout his career, he has been involved in executing long-term client engagement, business development, and creating strategic partnerships. He's very passionate about making the ever-changing technology relevant to us, and he does that by influencing policies and therefore making the changes. Currently, he's the Senior Director of Telco Industry Africa. Welcome, Lenin, and we're glad to have you. Our next speaker is Chris Otundo. Chris has over 13 years of experience in digital talent management in a wide range of people disciplines, for example, organizational design, job analysis, job evaluation, HR information systems, and many more. He is passionate, as you expect, about people, and he helps people get jobs that fit them. Currently, Chris is the Talent Acquisition Lead, Strategic Initiatives at Mastercard Foundation. We're glad to have you here today, Chris. Welcome. Our next panelist is Sarah Wakasa. Sarah Wakasa is a marketing and communication expert. She has a track record of organizing targeted campaigns across diverse industries, that is telcos, non-profit organizations, and such. Currently, Sarah is a VP of Marketing, the VP of Marketing at Stepwise. So welcome once again. And I believe we should start this conversation. So it is more of a conversation. You might wonder why we have gentlemen and women in this panel, but because this is an initiative that everyone has to take to ensure women succeed in the workplace. So to begin with, this question goes to all the panelists. One by one can answer. So in your own opinion or from your observations, what do you think is holding women back? Within the workplace, within the community, what is that one thing you think is holding women back?
Say it's systemic, gender bias and inequality. So, for decades right now, we have had a situation where, we're often faced with difficulty forming our own accurate and authentic self-assessment. And this goes back to, the systemic gender bias. And this does, in retrospect, affect our ability to stand confidently in our accomplishments. The research also goes to show that, it's easier for women to have, to have and listen to these judgmental thoughts more than men. And this begs the question that how can women at every stage and every level turn down the volume of this self-doubt in order to push forward?
I couldn't agree more, Sarah. Indeed, the systemic issues have bedeviled the situation. However, I'm of a slightly different view in the sense that these indeed have been the problems, but it's time for us to now change the narrative and see what we need to do going forward. So I do accept that indeed all those narratives have, and all those situations have made the situation bad. But I think that today there's an opportunity for women to truly stand up. So for instance, an example I wanted to share is that today when a job description is raised by a recruiter, men will look at the job, and if they can do the job 20%, they'll apply. And where a woman as well is looking at the same job, she'll only apply when she thinks she can do the job at 80%. Now, who's holding her back there? She's holding herself back. And again, to your point, Sarah, the systemic issues have been there, but we need to start and change the narrative. And I think in addition, today the workplace has refused to embrace the fact that the personal and our work merge. And so because those boundaries are blurred, and women a lot of times are and carry the weight of the home or the personal. So because of those lines being blurred, again, it affects the ability to really flourish at the workplace. And so these are some of the things I think are holding back women. But more and more organizations are beginning to think differently about embracing our personal lives and weaving that into our practices. And hopefully that would then also improve the situation. That's just my view.
Okay. Thank you so much for that, for the 2 points. And related to the points that you mentioned, Sarah mentioned that women are the ones holding themselves back in terms of doubting themselves. And Chris also mentioned that, women doubt themselves so much, they need to tick all the boxes before applying for a job. So this question goes to Chris. Much as, men are seem to be more confident in the workplace. Do men encounter, moments of imposter syndrome? You see, when you talk about imposter syndrome, most people talk about women in that context. But for men, we can borrow a few tips from you guys. How do you handle imposter syndrome and how do you navigate through that?
So absolutely, men do go through imposter syndrome. I will be vulnerable enough to tell you I have been through it as well. There's always someone who knows something more than you, and you walk into a room and you feel, am I really worthy of being in this room alongside these very intelligent people? And today is one of those days, of course. I'm talking to a subject around women, and what gives me the right to speak about women and really to speak as an authority? I don't have that capacity. But so indeed, men do suffer from it. And we suffer from many things, not just imposter syndrome. You've heard about short men going through Napoleon syndrome. And there's instances where we walk into a room and there's men who have more money than we do or than you do. There's times when there's a man who's a bigger physique than you are. And so these things matter to men because we're all about boasting and seeming to be one man upping the terminology, one man upping the other. So we do go through those instances where we are constantly experiencing self-doubt. But one, again, to Sarah's point, the society is more forgiving of us. And so we kind of are prepped up by the society that even if you don't know, you're given more grace. And I was listening to a conversation earlier just now, and where I think it's Pauline who was saying that the standard for women is so much higher at the workplace that you need to work so much harder to prove yourself. So because the society is more forgiving to men, so we get away with sometimes not pitching up to the maximum. That said, the other thing that men do to really get by this is really we are constantly willing to accept or to give compliments of ourselves. So a man will take a compliment. A man will accept that you're good, and they'll run with it. This is not particularly true, I find, of women. That a woman, you give a woman a compliment and say, "Hey, I think that's an amazing bag," and she'll quickly say, "No, I just bought it from the second hand." Come on, take the compliment, accept that it's amazing, you know, I think you did very well in the meeting. I stayed up all night preparing for it. Don't give us the subtitles of how you got there. Take the compliment. And the problem is with not taking compliment, with not being able to take it, you also can't dish it. And also you can't then, the ripple effect of that is that you're constantly putting yourself down, not raising yourself up. So the positive affirmation, I think, works for men. We're constantly propping ourselves. We're constantly talking about how good we are, and we're willing to say it and take it. So I think that's one thing, that we allow ourselves to take compliments, and we take compliments as well. But that's just the beginning of it. There's much more. Sarah, I'm curious to hear what you think and what your experience with men is.
I am so aligned with that, and it kind of reminds me in the same vein, the way we don't take compliments, we also have an inclination, and but maybe this is also cultural or maybe even psychological, an inclination to take in more assignments, more than men, even regardless of the pay gap, regardless of our JDs, women are more inclined to be yes people, especially in our workplace. And while this has, some cons, some pros, it definitely has some cons to it, where a lot of things can blow up in our face. Think of typical modern woman, probably in her mid-30s. She probably, and that is not a fact, and that is not a stereotype. Just giving an example of a woman who's a family woman, probably even a single mother, working in a corporate setup, and is being very ambitious, wanting to climb up the ladder. And they feel, or they imagine that for them to climb up the ladders, they have to be, like yes people, and they take in more assignments. And think about the work-life balance. When they have so much to do, there's a lot of overwork, and they still have to manage their families. So the whole point of women being inclined to always be yes people, unlike men again, has also kind of blown up to women's faces. Where we don't even specialize in what we're good at, and we keep on taking in more jobs, over-promising to deliver, then we end up under-delivering. So this just goes back again to boundaries, and having that confidence to just say no, or maybe I'll think about it. or maybe if you're going to say yes to an overwork, see whether that is something that's going to help you climb up in the corporate ladder or something that's actually going to sabotage you in the long run.
Yeah, I agree. And Teresa, before you carry on, I was just going to say, imposter syndrome is a psychological state, and it's up in the air. And the thing is, my view is that success is a mindset. There's a story of someone where people want something so bad, so they put their foot on the pedal, or on the accelerator, but subconsciously are so fearful, their foot is also on the brake. And so what happens is that a lot of times you want all this success, you want to grow, but you're so scared of the reality of being given that opportunity. So the question is, how do we tackle imposter syndrome? We need to work on our mindset, because we are the ones holding ourselves back. Feelings are not facts. Just because you feel that way doesn't mean it's a fact. So how about we then work on those feelings? And a lot of times that imposter syndrome is not a new thing. It's not coming from just last week. It's something you've grown up with. You've constantly been in environments where you've probably been, some things have been reaffirmed or told to you. And so it's compounded. And so you need to stop and actually reevaluate where it's coming from. And one of the things is to accept that it's not just you going through it. I've just shared with you that men go through it as well. So everyone is going through it. It's just in different forms. So the thing is, slow down, accept that it's happening to you, but also be forgiving of yourself, because be kind to yourself, and walk the journey of fixing where the likely damage happened in the past. Yeah, so then we can carry on.
Yeah, and I think I wanted to add something. Yes. So even as Chris is saying that we need to have that positive reaffirmation, we still need allies. We need to look for allies, whether it's male and female, and I'm glad this panel actually has a mix of both. And even your friends, who do you hang out with? Do they also remind you? Do they give you this kind of positive, reaffirmation? So we need to be very mindful of our environment, because women, again, we are very sensitive, again, as I mentioned before, to these judgmental thoughts that end up affecting our self-belief. So be careful. Don't hang out mostly. Don't spend your time with people who, negatively criticize you. There's positive and, of course, negative criticism, but just be mindful and hang around mostly with your cheerleaders.
That's a really good point. Thank you. Believing in yourself, affirmations, hanging out with the right people, and just remembering that everyone is going through it. So when we talk about developing the next generation of women leaders, that means we have women leaders currently, and Sarah is, one of the current generation women leader. And that means for us to get to the next level, we need mentorship from the people who are already there, both male and female. So what role does mentorship play in, developing the next generation of women leaders? And in your personal experience, let's just say leaders, to be inclusive of Chris, what role has mentorship played, and what are the sorts of different relationships that you can have with your mentors? And what role have they played in your success as a leader where you are currently?
All right. This is my question. All right. Yeah. I'm very happy to take that. First of all, I've been very fortunate throughout my career at a very young age to always have, mentors and apprentices holding my hand, teaching me from the hard proficiency skills to the very small things, like how do you show up? How do you even show up in a workplace? Things like soft skills, how do you communicate? And I've been very, very glad to have that all the way back from campus days and up until now, I'm the VP marketing at Stepwise. But then something interesting that is also dawning to me when it comes to apprenticeship, we always think of it as a very hierarchical aspect. And technology is changing the whole logic about this. You're thinking of a mixture of people from sometimes even 3 generations working in the same workplace. And that's where reverse mentorship comes in. So that even we, the older leaders, or maybe I could be a young leader, it's all very relative, but sometimes I fit into both spaces. Sometimes I am the mentor and the mentee, but then once we do accept that we can also learn from this upcoming generation, think of the Gen Zs or the Gen Ys being very, things like TikTok and Instagram are pretty much second nature to them. And then we have the baby boomers who might be struggling, and there could be a cultural gap between these two generations. And that's where reverse mentorship comes in, where you have these high potential employees mentoring senior employees. And that is something that I'm actually pretty much embracing. But what has worked throughout my career is the typical mentorship, where you have somebody hand-holding you. But what I'm coming to learn as I grow older and as I move up my ladder is, as I move up the ladder, is the need to also listen to the younger people, to listen to people who are even my juniors, because they too have a lot to teach me about inclusivity and or even exclusivity and what that means, especially for women in our workplace.
Great. Reverse mentorship. Lenin has joined us. Welcome. We just started the discussion a few minutes ago, so you're not so much behind. So the discussion was the role that mentorship has played in your success as industry leader. Yeah, so this is the discussion that's ongoing. Can give you some few minutes to settle as Chris answers, and then you'll go next.
Yeah, in preparing for, thank you and welcome, Lenin. Nice to see you. Now I'm a little bit more comfortable that I have a fellow man on the call. We can take the beating together. But the thing is, I learned something in preparing for this session, something called mentorship. So I think we're trying to make sure that it is inclusive as well. But I think the struggle we have, Sarah and Terry, is that in organizations, we don't seem to understand how to do mentorship. And so we talk about the need for it. We talk about the need to develop it within our organizations. But the leaders are so busy. The number of times I've seen people schedule sessions with the leaders to have a mentorship session, and the leader cancels or postpones it. And some of that mentorship is required in that particular time, but it's then overtaken by the leader having to move the session. So what I'm finding more practical, and this is something I want to propose to you for discussion, is shifting it more to around shadowing, where you live and walk with the leader, attend meetings with them, observe them, have a mentor for different things, as opposed to one who you hold on to for everything. So there'll be a mentor or a mentor for your financial space. There'll be a leader who you will look up to for your technical space. There'll be a leader who you look up to for your personal or family. But again, I'm planning on having it as a session where we actually meet and block out 1 hour. I'm finding that is less and less practical. And what I proposed earlier is what I'm seeing as being more practical. And in my experience, I have, again, had very, very strong leaders who I have observed and walked with and watched. I don't think we had a particular session where we sat down. And that is what has informed my career over the years, that I've just continued to stay in touch with them, watch the moves they're making. If I meet them at the club or out here, I see how they navigate to their parents, their families. And that is a learning moment for me. So that is my view of mentorship / mentorship.
Okay, great. Lenin?
Amazing. Chris, I'm happy we're here with you, and always great to team up with you every once in a while. So I have a couple of views on this particular topic. So I'm quite inclined to what Chris was just talking about, but I think I tend to look at it from a broad aspect. And one of the key things I always say we are not doing is we're not deliberate about our mentorship enough. The reason I say that is mentors, just as Chris says, play their different part in different seasons, depending on where we are in our lives and even in our careers. But secondly, I usually have this view of looking at myself as a company and having for different parts or elements. So I tend to call it a personal board of directors, because you find mentors are specialized, and there's only one area they can be able to uplift you or take you to the next level. You know, you talk of standing in the shoulder of giants, but do you have this vanilla of mentors who are bringing you up in different areas, and how are you deliberate enough about it? Do you have a structure around your mentorship? Are you deliberate about, you know, when and why you meet your mentors? But the most important thing is not just having a mentor, it's the mentee who drives the conversation, which I think is a missing piece of the puzzle, because we tend to approach, get mentors, and we expect mentors to just lead us through the way. While the only thing they do, and this might be controversial, is give you an alternative point of view and end up bringing a strength in you that you didn't even know you had. So you find eventually mentors play a very critical role in bringing out even some of the strengths that you indeed had before, but you didn't know that you have. So I think it's more about the deliberate effort, and it's more about you leading the conversation when it comes to being mentored or even having mentors, and having a mix of mentors across a diverse area of topics.
Okay. I totally agree. I totally agree with that, because you've just taken me down memory lane. And I remember my very first job. My boss called me to her office, female boss. She called me to her office, and she didn't articulate that she was going to be my mentor, but she literally just asked me a couple of things. Sarah, how do you want people to perceive you when you come to the office? How do you want people generally to perceive you in, you know, the corporate life? I remember saying all the cliches, hardworking, confident. And when I was saying all those things, I remember her giving me some two-liners of things that are obvious. You know, when you've worked in a corporate setup for even 2 years, that could not be very obvious to a person who's just joining the job market. And I remember one of the things she even told me was, then if you want to be known as XYZ, Sarah, this is what you need to do. And I remember, I remember feeling very, not overwhelmed, not even embarrassed, but I kind of felt that I finally have somebody within a corporate setup who can actually handhold me. And that just goes back to, I think we've all made this point that it's sort of the mentee needs to drive this conversation, but I think the mentor too needs to instigate this conversation. And then the rest of the relationship is pretty much the way you'd consider any other platonic or even any other relationship, whether it's a two-way street. So you cannot mentor somebody who doesn't want to be mentored. And so that goes to the mentors and the mentee. To the mentees, the mentor cannot be the one pushing you around for them to mentor you. This is all about you. This is somebody who's doing this without a payroll. They're doing this out of their selflessness, and they're using their time, out of their generosity. They are guiding you to towards every single step, or at least the first 2 steps in your career. So mentees should be as receptive to this kind of offers, which can be very, very rare. That's just my advice to both parties, mentors and mentees. Okay.
We had very important points there: reverse mentorship, the mentee driving the relationship, and taking a more practical approach. So, talking about practicability, all our panelists, you are leaders in your own capacity within the community and within your workplaces. So, what other practical strategies within the workplace? Practical, and 1, 2, 3, practical steps will you take to foster inclusion within the workplace? And this is in terms of culture, how women have generally been treated within the workplace. We've had places where if a man and a woman behave the same way, the woman is considered, bossy, loud. There are those words, yeah? So from a culture perspective, what practical strategies would you, give us or suggest to any organization on how to foster inclusion and, reduce discrimination of women within the workplace? Lenin, you can go first, or
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I can kick it off. I think when it comes to that, in terms of fostering a more inclusive workplace, one of the key things is to start from a policy perspective. I mean, what policies are you enacting as an organization to become more diverse, so that you can actually prepare ground for, people who have the intent or the culture to pretty much drive in the organization. I think the other bit is to always recognize a bias, because no matter how well both men and women are prepared, and they won't get a seat at the table if someone does not allow them to pull the chair, for example. So I think recognizing bias is a key thing that can be done over and above our call of duty. But the more important thing is, how do we practice inclusive leadership? And how do leaders, perhaps in our position, create a safe team environment where employees can speak and be heard and feel welcome to be very open about this particular topic? And it's that intention that I think will be able to pretty much push the needle when it comes to going the extra mile on this topic of creating a more inclusive workplace in terms of diversity.
Thank you.
I totally agree with Lenin there that we need to establish a high-level corporate leadership for gender equality. But then the thing is, this has to be a concerted effort, so that from the top level, there's already these goals for inclusion and diversity already ingrained in management and also business goals. Then we also need to hold our leadership accountable, so that we having a specific number of female leaders, for example, for an organization to strive for, is a good example of how we can hold our leadership accountable and have specific and measurable goals that a company or organization can implement. So when this doesn't happen, usually we have instances where employees even doubt the effectiveness of such principles, and they just might regard such policies as PR gimmicks. But then when this is ingrained in top leadership, the entire organization will know that this is very intentional, and whatever the organization is doing in terms of establishing high-level corporate leadership for gender equality is a strategy that they're not just doing that for branding purposes, but they're doing this to be very intentional about diversity and gender inclusivity.
Yeah, Terry, this particular conversation is very personal to me, because I've worked for organizations where that was a mandate that we had to try and shore up the numbers in leadership, women in leadership. And I talked to a lot of women trying to bring them over to the organizations I worked for at the senior most level. The challenge is that organizations speak about this thing, they speak about the need for inclusion, but when it comes to the action, the tough decision around, let's place Sarah at the helm of this function, that decision point is what they don't make. And so my challenge to them is, one, be bold, make the decisions. Like, because of historical injustices, women have not had these leadership positions. And so if you look at a pool of talent, there'll be 80% of men who have gotten those opportunities and 20% who have just barely started. So if you want to shift the needle, you need to be bold. Make those calls now. The other thing that is a challenge to my HR colleagues is to begin to make these things a little bit more data-centric. So quantify the impact, both negative and positive, of the gender parity discussion. So as Sarah said, an interesting point around women taking up more responsibility. So if you actually don't have these women at the workplace, there could be an issue of productivity. And it needs to be quantified so that the leadership is seeing it and saying, hiya, if we don't actually have these women, we will struggle. And maybe if we have them at the top layer, we might even have more productivity. But it has to be tangible data. So those are the two, in my mind, the boldness and perhaps data-centric decision making.
Oh, all right. Thank you so much. Seem to be running out of our 30 minutes. So one less than a minute. We can only, get so much knowledge from you guys. So what is one book you would recommend to us, just within within less than a minute for all of us. One book and why? Yeah. So we can start with Sarah.
Well, I'll have to be. Mine is not very specific to this conversation. I would recommend reading Building a Brand. Let me get the exact title, Building a Story Brand. I read this book 3 months ago by Donald Miller. So the whole point, very relevant for marketers and PR people, I think very relevant in our lives, where who is the hero in your story? For marketers, it's definitely the customer. For HR, it's definitely your employees. For CIO, it's the rest of us, or the people who are listening in. So and sometimes the hero in our lives is actually ourselves. So it can be very relevant, and the whole takeout from that book is actually who is the hero, and can actually be very contextual. And how do you relate, to the hero?
Yeah, I'm a bit biased to the future of work. So in preparing for the leaders of the future, you also need to be aware about what's coming and what it portends for you as a leader. So 21 Questions for the 21st Century by Yuval Harari. Very intense book because it prepares you and it just gives your mind, puts your mind in that frame that the things you need to do to prepare yourself, even as a lady, even as a woman at the workplace.
Okay. Yes, Lenny.
Great. Mine will be The First 90 Days by Michael Watkins. It's one of my favorite reads. And the reason I recommend that is it clearly outlines the different seasons we are in our careers, whether you're in a promotion, whether you're getting into a new job, and you get to read and learn how different leaders navigated different paths. So you get to know whether you're in a startup setup, you're in an acceleration scenario, in a turnaround setup. And that all sums up to, you understanding your season and your career and yourself as a person. So I highly recommend The First 90 Days by Michael Watkins.
Oh, all right. Thank you so much. You can be sure that when we are reading this book, we will have you in mind. So this session will be well, remembered. So thank you so much for 30 minutes. We really appreciate your time and your knowledge and your insights. And we look forward to having you in future sessions. So thank you so much. And I'll hand it over to the host. And thank you for having me as well.